Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're diving into the Las Vegas Raiders and why I'm super frustrated with the team right now. So head coach Antonio Pierce just announced that Gardner Minshew will be the starter for week 1 instead of Aiden O'Connell. Honestly, I think the only reason for this is the big contract they gave Minshew during free agency. You don't pay a backup quarterback $25 million just to sit on the bench, right? Sure, O'Connell did throw a pick six in the preseason game against the Cowboys, and yeah, he didn't look that great. But honestly, Minshew didn't impress me either. He had one good deep pass to Trey Tucker. But other than that, nothing really stood out. I feel like Minshew isn't as accurate as some Raiders fans think, and he definitely doesn't have the mobility to take the team to the next level. Let's be real, the Raiders are in a tough division with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and now Bo Nix, who looks like he's going to be a star for a long time. I know Nix hasn't played an NFL game yet, but he's got tons of potential, and nobody has played more college snaps than him, ever. So now the Raiders are up against 3 really good quarterbacks, plus coaches like Jim Harbaugh, Andy Reid, and Sean Payton, who are just legends. These guys have been dominating the league for years. It's time for the Raiders to find a long-term solution at quarterback. Coach Pierce said before free agency and the draft that he didn't want a temporary fix at the position, but here we are with Minshew and O'Connell, which feels like a Band-Aid solution. Now, do I think the Raiders will still make the playoffs? Yes, I do. And I'm saying this as a Colts fan who watched the team win 9 games last year with Minshew as the starter. The Raiders have a better roster, even significantly better than what the Colts had last year. The Raiders have one of the best defenses in football, and they've got Brock Bowers, a generational talent at tight end. The Colts even tried to trade up to get him. That's how good he is. Then there's Davante Adams, Trey Tucker, DJ Turner, who looks like he's going to be a future star, and the list goes on. Jacoby Myers, and more. The weapons are there, and the defense is solid, but the quarterback play needs to be consistent every single week to compete in the AFC. As long as Minshew doesn't turn the ball over and they stick to playing through Zamir White, they'll be fine. Alexander Mattison was a nice pickup in free agency too. But look at the schedule. It starts with the Chargers on the road. I think the Raiders will do pretty well in the division this year, to be honest. After that, it's the Ravens, Panthers, and Browns. So in the first 4 games, you've got a division rival, a Super Bowl contender, maybe the worst team in football, and then possibly the best defense in the league when they're at full strength. This is not an easy start, and Minshew is going to be tested right out of the gate. The key is to avoid losing those tough road games early on. So it's really important for Minshew to step up. And I hope he does because I actually like Gardner Minshew, and I'm rooting for the Raiders. But the big question is, what's the ceiling for this team? They're just missing a solid quarterback, right? I think next year, the Raiders might trade up, maybe even give up 3 first-round picks, to draft someone like Carson Beck, or preferably Shedeur Sanders. As a Colorado Buffaloes fan myself, I believe Shedeur would be a great fit for the Raiders. He might not have the strongest arm, but he's extremely accurate and poised in a clean pocket. I think he could become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, which is exactly what the Raiders need. Right now, though, the Raiders don't have many options. I'm not blaming them entirely because they did try to trade up for a quarterback, but other teams just weren't willing to make a deal. Maybe the asking price was too high. And it's not like the Raiders could have traded for someone like Dak Prescott. They just didn't have many choices. Michael Penix was another guy I thought the Raiders should have considered, but again, they tried to trade up, and it didn't work out. So we can't really blame the Raiders for that. But when the next opportunity comes, I believe the Raiders need to go all in. Whether it's trading up for a top quarterback, or maybe getting someone like Dak Prescott if he becomes available, they need to find a real solution. You're just not going to win a Super Bowl with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Sure, you might make the playoffs and maybe even win a playoff game, but that's about it. The ceiling is capped, the Raiders have a new head coach, Antonio Pierce, and a new GM, so they need to figure out the most important position in the game. They can't just go with a temporary fix and hope it works out. The big question for the Raiders is how they're going to approach these games. They'll likely focus on a run-heavy strategy and build off that with play-action plays. We've seen Minshew and O'Connell operate in play-action and try to mix things up with fake handoffs, trying to keep the defense off balance. But when the pocket breaks down, neither Minshew nor O'Connell look great on the move. They're not throwing into tight windows with much velocity, so they're basically relying on guys to be wide open. That's a big reason why Minshew had success with the Colts last year. His receivers were wide open. He threw 15 touchdowns against 9 interceptions, which is great for a backup. But now Minshew is the starter for a team with high expectations. The Raiders have one of the coolest stadiums in football, and their tickets are some of the most expensive in the league. This team has to perform, no question about it. The real concern is whether they can do it. The offensive line is a big question mark. Cody Whitehair is new, and while they have Colton Miller, who's one of the best left tackles in the game, we'll have to see how it all comes together. But beyond that, there's nothing particularly special. I like the weapons. And I like the defense, but it all comes down to how your quarterback performs. Minshew looked pretty good against the Minnesota Vikings, but against the Dallas Cowboys, he was just flat out bad. If I'm being honest, he looked terrible. He might get one more chance against the San Francisco 49 ERs on Friday, August 23rd, but after that, we're talking about just 2 weeks before facing the Chargers on the road in a divisional game. That's going to be huge for the Raiders. You definitely don't want to start your season by losing to a divisional rival, especially one with a new head coach and a lot of new players. The last time the Raiders played the Chargers, it was that crazy game where they scored 63 points in Week 15. I remember watching that, and O'Connell really shined. It might have been the best game of his career. As a rookie, he threw 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in that game. I think O'Connell has more upside than Minshew, but in terms of the floor, which is what the Raiders seem to want, they're looking for consistency. They want a game manager, someone who won't win you games but also won't lose them. If it wasn't about money, I honestly think O'Connell would be the starter. But with Minshew's free agency contract, you can't really justify paying him $25 million to sit on the bench. That's the same reason the Colts let him go. They didn't want to pay that much for a backup. I think the plan all along for the Raiders was to start Minshew, but I'm not sure what to expect from him. As a Colts fan, I got frustrated with him later in the season because I realized he's just not a starting caliber quarterback. He can come in and throw the football, but once teams start getting film on him, he becomes predictable. He can't make the big plays to push you over the top. If you don't believe me, just watch Week 18 of Colts versus Texans in Indianapolis. It was a win and you're in situation for the Colts, and they lost. They played through the run. Jonathan Taylor had 188 yards, and the defense played well, but they still lost. So Raiders fans, I love your roster and think you're going to have a big season. But just know that with Minshew, your ceiling is capped.